Baker Mayfield is back on a 3-year deal on the eve of the negotiating window opening. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this live episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every single day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at @JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as the deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is by becoming a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, just general thoughts. If you're David in the live chat, you're going to get updates on my son's hockey tournament that we just got home from today. But for all of those, you can head to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. As promised, my top 5 offensive and defensive free agents that the Buccaneers should be interested in coming up in a little bit, but we got to talk about the headline. That's why we're live on YouTube tonight, Sunday night, and that is that Baker Mayfield agreed to a deal with the Bucs late Sunday afternoon for 3 years, $100 million. Now, many were hoping that this was going to get done ahead of Monday's open negotiating window, but much like the Mike Evans situation, it appeared over the weekend that Mayfield was, in fact, going to hit the open market and test free agency, potentially taking a career year that he had last season and parlaying that into a mega deal, playing for potentially his 5th team in just 3 years. Instead, he wanted to stay in Tampa. The Bucs wanted him to stay in Tampa, and in fact, he is staying in Tampa. So we do not have the full structure yet, but by multiple reports on Twitter and throughout the social media stratosphere, it looks like this is essentially a 2-year, $60 million deal that the Bucs can get out of after 2025 if they choose to do so. There's $50 million in guaranteed money at signing, with 40 of that guaranteed in year 1. Then he can get up to $20 million in year 2 with $10 million guaranteed. Then year 3 can be worth another $40 million. This deal can actually reach all the way up to $115 million if he hits his incentives. That means the Bucs have locked up their quarterback for the same duration as their future Hall of Fame wide receiver, and both are going to be in Tampa through at least the 2025 season. On top of that, Antoine Winfield Jr. is locked up for this season, and I still expect the Buccaneers to work out a long-term deal with him before that July franchise tag deadline, and then he won't be playing on that 1-year deal. And I'm sure a lot of people are mad online. I've already seen some people that are mad online, because if there's one thing we know, it's that people love to get mad online. But they're upset that Baker is getting $100 million, and that's too much money for those listening. I used air quotes there. But again, it's essentially $30 million a year on average for 2 years. And if things go south, the Bucs can get out, even if he plays out the 3 years. Let's break this down just a little bit. If he plays out the 3 years, you're averaging $33.3 million a year, which barely puts him in the top 10 of quarterbacks right now. The 2-year $30 million per that is definitely going to happen puts him in a tie for 12th. And the quarterbacks that he's tied with are Josh Allen and Derek Carr. But those quarterback salaries are going to continue to keep growing. Mahomes is going to get a new deal. Allen is going to get a new deal. Kirk Cousins is a free agent. He hasn't been paid yet. Dak Prescott is in a contract year. Russell Wilson is going to get a new deal next year that is going to have significant money based on how he plays this year for whatever team signs him for that minimum deal and lets the Denver Broncos pay him $39 million. So by this time next season, Mayfield may barely be in the top half of the league in quarterback salaries. That is a great deal for both sides without question. Baker went into this past year on a prove-it deal. He proved it. He got money that he's happy with, got a big payday, and if he continues on an upward trajectory with Liam Cohen as the offensive coordinator, building off of what they did in 2024, his contract this time next year could look like an absolute steal. The Bucs have a viable starter in the league coming off of a season where he led the team to a divisional round playoff game. He's tied to a receiver that was his favorite target for the 2 years that we know are going to happen in this contract, with an offensive coordinator that he's worked with before and that took the job in Tampa to work with Baker. He even said it in his press conference, then had to correct himself and throw in the word potentially at the very end. Everything lines up for the ability to build off the success of a 4,000-yard, 28 touchdown, 10 interception season that led to his second best quarterback rating in a season in his career. Quite a few players took to social media to express their excitement, including Tristan Wirfs and Rachaad White. Tristan quote tweeted the NFL's Twitter account who posted the news, and all he said in his caption was, "Now we go." So you know that Tristan is excited, not just to have his quarterback returning, but that he knows that his deal is just down the road a little bit, and he is going to be getting paid sooner rather than later. The Bucs are going to continue to get pieces in place that they need for next season. Obviously, sites like Over the Cap and Spot Track don't have the numbers up yet, but expect this move to take the Bucs below $10 million in cap space, likely closer to that $5 million in cap space range. So we're going to start seeing some of those corresponding moves happen sooner than later, especially with the negotiating window opening at 4:00 on Monday. I still expect Russell Gage to be gone. I'm still guessing that Carlton Davis is going to be gone, whether it's a trade or a cut. Then you have Vita Vea and Jamel Dean that you can restructure their contracts. Chris Godwin, you could try to extend him and lower that massive cap hit that he has for this year and really try to alleviate some pressure there. Winfield's deal, once that is done, is going to free up even more space this season. And much like Mike Evans' deal, I expect there to be plenty of void years down the line for Baker to free up some space in the short term. But with Baker and Mike Evans and Antoine Winfield Jr. locked up, where do the Bucs turn to bring in some outside help next season? We're going to get to that in just a second. I'm going to jump over to the chat real quick. James in the chat says, yes, Bake Show is back. This is great for everyone. We got Scotty J, a Locked On Bucs insider. He's in there. He says, preach, James, preach. I'm just here to, talk about the news, talk about all the aspects. I wouldn't call it preaching, but if you're going to take it that way, I appreciate it. I'm just here doing what I do. Al Bundy in the chat says James Yarcho is better than that bald guy with glasses. Now, I will not say that. I love David. He is one of my dearest friends. I consider him like family to me. David was phenomenal on the show. I miss him immensely, but he and I still chat all the time, and he's going to be on this show this year, probably sooner than later, but definitely a crossover Thursday episode coming up with David when the Bucs take on the Commanders. Flash in the chat says, I'd let Russell Gage go, but keep Carlton Davis. I don't understand why everyone wants to get rid of Davis. Flash, here's the thing. I don't want the Bucs to get rid of Carlton Davis. this would strictly be a business move because of the amount of money that he commands and the amount of time that he consistently misses. The Bucs can alleviate a lot of cap stress by letting him go. It's not that they want to move on from him. This isn't a situation where they just, kind of like Devin White, where they don't want him around anymore, but the pay is not reflective of the production anymore, and the Bucs are probably going to try to get out from under that for that reason. But I will be talking about some of these defensive free agents that the Buccaneers should be interested in. That is coming up next here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, brake kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. Everydayers, make sure you're coming back tomorrow. I'm sure there will be plenty to discuss after the negotiating window opens up, whether that means the Bucs have talked to people or maybe some former Buccaneers have found some new homes. We will break it all down on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. The Buccaneers wanted to run it back, but they can't bring back the exact same squad that they had last year and expect there to be a ton of improvements. There are positions that desperately need an upgrade or full-on roster holes that have to be filled in because of guys leaving. So who should we be looking towards for the Bucs to get that help? I'm gonna say this disclaimer a couple of times. Just because I list a player does not mean that the Buccaneers are for sure going to pursue them. And they're definitely not going to pursue everybody that I mentioned, but these are guys that I believe could come in and help the Buccaneers for an affordable price. You are not going to get major marquee names out of these lists. These are going to be guys that can help improve or upgrade a roster position that aren't going to break the bank. So I'm going to start with my 5 defensive players that the Buccaneers should go after. And number one, a lot of you already know who I'm going to talk about because I've talked about him a lot since the season ended. I talked about him on Friday, and that is Jordan Whitehead. Whitehead's best production has come under Todd Bowles, bringing him back at an affordable price for a year or two to line up opposite of Antoine Winfield Jr. makes the back end of the defense light years better than it was last season. The reunion would probably be best for both parties. There isn't going to be much of a learning curve since Whitehead has played in the system and excelled in the system before. And if you bring him in on a one-year deal, Whitehead can really blow up and try to do essentially like a prove-it deal kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of talk about prove-it deals on these lists because that's how these guys are affordable. They're going to sign for a low amount of money somewhere, hope to have a big season, then cash in on the following year. These are all relatively young guys that are going to be able to cash in again before they're 30 years old. So you're probably looking at a lot of these guys as being 1 or 2 year deals. Jordan Whitehead lines up with that perfectly. He is a plug-and-play starter at signing who has played in the system before, understands what Todd Bowles wants, understands that Todd Bowles is going to maximize his abilities, and you're probably looking at that $5 to $6 million a year range. The second guy that I'm going to talk about, again, Mike Edwards. Second verse, same as the first. He's coming off a 1-year, $3 million deal with the Chiefs and can probably be had for under $5 million a year. Now, I don't think he would be as effective as Jordan Whitehead would be, but he was a ball hawk in Tampa and is certainly an upgrade over Ryan Neal for a very affordable price. Again, has been in the system, knows what Todd Bowles' defense is all about, knows what he can accomplish in this defense, and can hit the ground running if he signs with the Buccaneers. And with the influx of safeties that have been let go as cap casualties, there's going to be other guys on the market that are going to be in higher demand and are going to get big time money. Edwards and Whitehead are not those dudes. So the Bucs will be able to benefit greatly if they're able to reunite with one of those two guys, both in terms of upgrading the defense and in terms of the salary cap. The third guy that I'm going to mention, and some of you might wince a little bit, but stick with me here. Sean Murphy-Bunting. Yes, another reunion from a member of the Super Bowl team. And I think one of these three guys is coming in one way, shape, or form. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But this is another guy that makes sense if the Buccaneers move on from Carlton Davis. I did see some of you guys in the chat saying that you don't think Carlton Davis is going to go, and I totally understand. He is one of the guys that I pinpointed that I believed is on that chopping block. We know from the combine that the Bucs are listening to offers for Carlton Davis, and he might drum up some interest in the trade market. We will find out more. Maybe they stick with him. And when he's on the field, he's effective. There's no question about it. But again, does the pay match the production? I think it's a business thing, not a personal thing by any means. But the Bucs had to make a decision between Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting because both were going to command similar money on the open market, and Tampa couldn't afford to keep them both. Or at least that's what we thought. They kept Dean, and then Sean Murphy-Bunting landed with the Titans for 1 year and $3.5 million. His estimated market value right now with Spot Track is $6.7 million, but I'm not sure it quite gets that high. Although even at 6.7, that's still a pretty significant drop from what Carlton Davis is making per year. And I know there are some that might still be bitter about Murphy-Bunting's last season with the Bucs, but you have to remember he got injured in week 1 and he never fully recovered before coming back onto the field. And then last year, through the offseason, being able to come back, heal from that injury, he played in 14 games with the Titans, had 2 interceptions, a career high of 8 passes defensed, plus 2 forced fumbles, 3 tackles for loss. This is another plug-and-play starter that knows the system, can hit the ground running. He was tweeting out a bunch of stuff on Sunday from Pro Football Focus about his time with the Buccaneers, being one of, I believe it was 3 players this in the last 2 decades to have 3 interceptions in the postseason, and he got 3 interceptions in 3 playoff games. So we know Sean Murphy-Bunting can make plays. He can defend in Todd Bowles' system. This would be a guy that I would look to if they move on from Carlton Davis. And the reason I bring up these 3 guys first, because these are not in order of, most important to least important or who I think the Bucs would want the most. These are just 5 guys that I've put in a list. But I bring up these 3 first because D. Delaney posted a semi-cryptic tweet on Sunday that just simply said, quote, OG coming home soon. Now, this may have absolutely nothing to do with football, or it could mean that one of these 3 guys that Delaney played with is returning to the team and the secondary that Delaney is part of. My guess is Whitehead seems to be the most likely of the 3 candidates, but all 3 make plenty of sense. The 4th guy that I'm going to mention is Josh Uche. If the Bucs want to shore up the edge rusher spot in free agency to keep all options open come the NFL draft, Uche may be a low-risk, high-reward guy. He is coming off of a year where he had just 3 sacks, but it was on a team that was not fully healthy, was not very good. Nothing about the Patriots last year was very impressive. Pairing him with an emerging Yaya Diaby, plus you rotate in Joe Tryon Shoyinka, the Bucs could be in a position where they catch lightning in a bottle for a second time, coming off of Shaq Barrett's tenure with a team that started in a similar kind of deal. They signed Shaq Barrett to a 1-year prove-it deal. He blew up. They franchise tagged him, then gave him the long-term money. If Uche can prove that he can be the guy after 1 year, he could then cash in with the cap going up and the Bucs having more cap space to be able to work with. Edge rushers are not cheap. And if you can get one in a loaded class of high-end guys for a low price and he balls out, you are in great shape. And then the final guy, harken back to a player that Evan mentioned about a month ago, actually, is Bryce Huff. And again, this is if they address edge in free agency. I could see them going in this direction. And at that point, if you also bring in Whitehead, you have two former Jets joining the team together. Now, this is going to cost much more than Uche will, but this is a guy that would get a multi-year deal, not a prove-it deal. You can give him a large signing bonus, spread that out over the duration of the contract, maybe even add in some void years if you need to make sure that that initial 2024 cap hit is low. But he's coming off of a 10-sack season, had 10 tackles for loss, but he's not great in the run game, which could come back to bite the Bucs. They really want to stress their run defense, something that they hang their hat on because it turns teams into one-dimensional passing machines. Then you can get after the quarterback. Your secondary can make plays, and you can really dial up the pressure. The most important thing, though, is that the Bucs find someone who can get after the quarterback and force teams to make mistakes. That is something that they lacked greatly last season. Gonna hit the chat as soon as I come back from the break because we still have to talk about the offensive side of the ball. That is coming up next here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, futures. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Right now, UConn is the favorite to win it all at plus 480, with Houston at plus 650, Purdue at plus 700, and Tennessee with the fourth highest odds at plus 1,000. The Gators are plus 6,500. Florida Atlantic is plus 13,000, and USF is a whopping plus 30,000. So a $5 bet on USF to win it all could win you a cool $1,500 if you believe the Bulls are going to shock the world. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Wrapping things up here on a live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. Baker Mayfield, 3 years, $100 million. He is back in Tampa Bay. Going to jump in the chat real quick before I run through my offensive free agents. Where was he? I saw Michael. Was it Michael in the chat? It was. Is there any way we could trade for a defensive end like Bosa from the Chargers? I don't think so. Not this year for sure. They just can't afford that high profile type of player to be able to bring in. Bosa is for sure on the block. We heard about that on Sunday. There's quite a few players that the Chargers have been listening to calls about. Bosa was one. There was another defensive player. Then they were listening in on Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So Harbaugh making some big changes out in LA. It's just not in the cards for the Buccaneers this season to pull off that level of a trade without some major contract restructuring. And then in order for that to happen, he would have to get permission to speak with the team ahead of time. They'd have to work everything out. It's just not in the cards for them. I did see another comment that I wanted to address. Here it is. Donald Bolton in the chat says, what do you think about the running back situation? White, number one for sure. Do we try and sign a vet free agent like Dalvin Cook or someone in that class? Well, Donald, I'm glad you mentioned that because we are going to go through the offensive free agents that I want to see the Buccaneers target. And I am starting things off with a running back. And the first guy on my list is Gus Edwards. Yes, I love the Gus bus. And he has been absolutely devastated by injury, as has his teammate, J.K. Dobbins. So I don't know if it's something in the water in Baltimore or if the Ravens just have the worst luck in drafting running backs that can't stay healthy and wide receivers that absolutely stink. But Edwards is going to be available for a cheap price and would complement Rachaad White in a fantastic way. He could even take over as the lead back if worst case scenario, Rachaad White were to go down with injury. That's not something that I think many of us would have trusted Chase Edmonds with last season. He is a short yardage specialist. He can catch the ball. He can bowl over opposing defenders either at the line of scrimmage or at the second level. And he is exactly what the Bucs need as someone who offers a skill set that's different from what they already have. I've mentioned that on the show quite a few times. The Bucs need two running backs, and they cannot bring in two guys that are exactly like Rachaad White. That gives you no change in your abilities to produce different things on offense. Edwards, over the last couple of years, trails only Derrick Henry in short yardage rushing conversion rate. Now, what that means is it is his attempts on third or fourth down with 2 yards or fewer to go. And he succeeds at an 82.6% clip. Only one better is Derrick Henry. That is an impressive stat. It is absolutely outstanding. And it would also put more trust in the Bucs to be able to gain those short yardage situations with their running back rather than relying on Baker having to sneak the ball and potentially get hurt like we saw last season. The next guy that I'm going to talk about, I'm sticking in Baltimore with John Simpson. I saw someone in the chat said, now fix the O-line. Here you go. This is a guy that could come in and start for you immediately at left guard. He played on a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Ravens and was incredibly reliable. He took over 1,100 snaps last year, and he was one of their best run blocking offensive linemen. He's got that nastiness in him that you know that the Buccaneers love in their linemen, and he's only 27 years old. This isn't a guy that's going to get some huge $15 million a year contract, and he could be a huge upgrade and cost next to nothing in the world of starting offensive linemen in free agency. Putting him and his 330 pounds in between Tristan and Hainsey would be an outstanding addition, especially in the run game. Another offensive lineman that I have mentioned before on this show is Brian Allen. This time we're looking at center. Allen is a guy that played for Cohen in Los Angeles. He started every game for their Super Bowl season, but then has only started 12 games over the course of the last 2 years. In his career, he's been called for something like 4 penalties total. He's absolutely fantastic, but he could come in at center, and then the Bucs are able to move Robert Hainsey back to guard where he played at Notre Dame. Bringing in Allen is a little bit risky with the injury concerns, but could pay huge dividends if Allen is able to stay on the field. If he leaves the field, you're right back to where you were last year. Hainsey's going to slide back to center. They're probably re-signing Aaron Stinney as a backup, I can't think of the term now. Utility player like in baseball that can play multiple positions across the offensive line. So if they sign Allen and move Hainsey over, then Allen goes down. You're moving Hainsey back. You're sliding Stinney into the left guard spot. The fourth guy that I'm going to mention, and some of you are going to cringe again, and that's okay. These are my opinions. You can have your opinions. We all love one another. Van Jefferson. I do still really like the idea of bringing Van Jefferson in to be the Bucs' number 3 receiver. He's played for Cohen before, but he's obviously familiar with the Falcons' new offensive coaching staff, so he may opt to stay there. However, seeing what Baker was able to do last season and the offense that he could be a part of should be intriguing enough for him to consider joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers if they are interested. We don't know the quarterback situation in Atlanta. It could be Kirk Cousins. It could be Justin Fields. It could be Desmond Ridder again. They could be drafting somebody. With the Bucs, Jefferson knows exactly what his role will be and exactly who his quarterback will be. His estimated market value is a little over $2 million a season, which is far less than what Russell Gage is getting. And I really liked Russell Gage. It just didn't work out. And sometimes that happens. So the Bucs could release Gage, sign Jefferson, and have nearly, maybe even a little bit more than 70% of Gage's cap savings left over to allocate to somebody else. Jefferson is only 27. Bringing him in for a year or two could help the Bucs in the short term, potentially give him another shot at reviving his once promising career, and then he could cash in again big before he turns 30 years old. And then the final offensive guy that I am going to bring up is Cam Akers, another running back and another player with ties to Cohen, another player that has dealt with injury, but these guys are in the bargain bin for a reason, right? But you guys know how this works. Coaches like to work with players that they have coached before. Players like to play for coaches that they've played for before. And when you take a look at Cam Akers in his situation, he is not going to command huge dollars in free agency. He's coming off of a season where he had less than 200 rushing yards between his stint with the Rams and the Vikings. He would be a rotational guy, but in his rookie season, which was Cohen's last year in his first stint with LA, Akers had 625 rushing yards, 123 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then he got hurt the following year. Then the year after that, Cohen returns, and Akers goes off for 786 rushing yards, 117 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. So his 2 most productive seasons by a wide margin came with Cohen being one of his coaches. I could see why the two would want to reunite. Akers is looking to bounce back from a frustrating year. Cohen is looking to bolster a running back room that has one guy in it. This would be a perfect pairing on a deal that's affordable, allowing Akers to shine and maybe move on afterwards to a bigger deal. But I love the idea of Cam Akers becoming a rotational guy in the running back room. Gonna jump into the chat one more time before we get out of here. Donald in the chat says, love the idea of Van Jefferson. Flash in the chat says, I just go with Moore, but Van Jefferson would be good as well. I think David Moore is going to end up in Carolina with Dave Canales and the staff over there. I think he's a guy that they're going to end up bringing in. They brought him over from Seattle, and now they're probably going to pursue him in Carolina. I would love having David Moore back. He really came on towards the tail end of the season and made some big plays, but I think Carolina seems like the most likely landing spot for him. Art in the chat says, yeah, Cam, with the thumbs up emoji. Al Bundy in the chat says 2.2 yards per carry before he got fired out of the Rams. No, thank you. Again, Al, go back and look at what he was able to do when he was with Cohen. Cohen knows how to maximize the talent because obviously that was there. And we're not talking about a guy that has to take over for Rachaad White. We're talking about a complimentary guy. Come in, give him a spell. This would essentially be replacing Chase Edmonds. And I think Cam Akers is an upgrade over Chase Edmonds, but he's not going to be good enough to steal the job away from Rachaad White. And you know what? If he does steal the job away from Rachaad White, all the power to him, because that means that he is being really productive. And maybe Rachaad White is regressing, or maybe a combination of the both. But again, you're not going to get a guy that is averaging 4 yards a carry for the price that you're going to get Cam Akers. That's not what you're looking for. That's not what the Bucs are looking for. You're looking for depth, or you're looking for bargain starters. In the running back situation, you're looking for depth. You don't need a starter. You have a starter. You can pay a guy like Cam Akers probably $2.5 million. And now all of a sudden you have a guy that can come in relief of Rachaad White. We know White's going to get the bulk of the carries. That is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Bucs. I appreciate all of you jumping in the chat. Really excited to see all of you coming in for this live stream. Coming up tomorrow, we are going to have plenty of reaction to the start of the open negotiating window. I refuse to call it legal tampering because just by sheer definition, that doesn't make any sense. So the legal negotiating period or the open negotiating window, whatever you want to call it, kicks off on Monday. We are going to react to it on Tuesday's episode. In the meantime, of course, check out everything going on over at BucsNation.com. Make sure you are following along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.